Back in the golden age of American muscle, nobody bought these cars as investments. They bought them to drag race on Friday nights, cruise Main Street on Saturday, and maybe, just maybe, outrun a cop on Sunday. Nobody looked at a 1969 Camaro and said, "That's my retirement plan." But here's what happened. A handful of collectors who were paying attention in 2020, right in the middle of a global pandemic, when the world felt like it was falling apart, quietly started buying the right cars at the right prices. And since then, 5 specific American muscle cars have done something that most stock portfolios couldn't touch. They doubled in value. Some went far beyond that. Today, I'm breaking down all 5. We'll go through the numbers, the auction results, the history behind each car, and at the very end, I'm going to tell you which 2 of these cars still have room to run in 2026. Stay until the end, because car number 1, the price you're going to hear is going to make your jaw drop. Let's start with number 5. Car number 5, the 1969 Chevrolet Camaro Z28. Now, the Z28 isn't exactly a forgotten car. Most people in this hobby know the name. But what happened to its value since 2020 is a story worth telling. Back in 2020, a solid, documented 1969 Z/28, not a show car, but a real running example with the right paperwork, was trading in the $60,000 to $80,000 range at auction. Good money, sure, but nothing that made front-page news. Here's the background. The Z28 was built for one reason: to qualify Chevrolet for the SCCA Trans-American Sedan Championship. It wasn't even officially advertised. You had to know to ask for it. The package came with a 302 cubic inch V8, a small block engine that was actually undersized for a performance car of this era, but it revved like nothing else. While Chevrolet officially rated it at 290 horsepower, the actual output with the solid lifter motor was closer to 360 horsepower stock, and with the over-the-counter cross-ram intake and dual 4-barrel carbs, well north of 400. On the track, Z28 drivers dominated the 1968 Trans Am season, winning 10 of 13 events. The championship was essentially a foregone conclusion. Now here's the value story. In 2020, the Z/28 was already respected, but still seen as a production car. Then the pandemic hit, and something interesting happened in the classic car market. Buyers who had been waiting on the sidelines suddenly had time to do research, money they weren't spending on travel, and a renewed appreciation for tangible assets. High-quality Z28s got bought up quickly. According to Classic.com, the highest recorded sale for a 1969 Camaro Z28 hit $330,000 for an RS Z28 combination car in January 2025. Even standard, well-documented Z28s are now regularly crossing in the $120,000 to $180,000 range. That's roughly a doubling to tripling from where the market sat in early 2020. What drove it? Documentation. The buyers who pushed these prices weren't looking for a driver. They were looking for proof. Original broadcast sheets, cowl tags, date-coded parts, window stickers. The Z28s with the paper trail got the premium. The ones without got left behind. Remember that. It matters for everything else I'm going to tell you today. Car number 4, the 1970 Chevrolet Chevelle SS 454LS6. This one is the car that many muscle car historians consider the purest expression of what the golden era was all about. Not the fastest off the line, not the rarest, but arguably the most balanced, most powerful, most complete muscle car ever built by General Motors. Here's the setup. In 1970, GM finally lifted its internal displacement ban on midsize cars. Before that, nothing bigger than 400 cubic inches could go in a Chevelle. When the ban lifted, Chevy went straight to 454, and not just any 454, the LS6 version, which was hand-assembled, rated at 450 horsepower and 500 pound-feet of torque. Those numbers were actually conservative. Independent testing consistently showed the LS6 making more than its rated output. Motor Trend tested one and said it was the quickest American production car they had ever tested. Car and Driver called it the closest thing to a race car you could buy with a heater and a radio. But here's the value story. In 2020, a documented LS6 coupe in good condition could be found in the $75,000 to $100,000 range. A well-restored example might push $150,000. Respectable numbers, but not extraordinary. Fast forward to May 2025. At Mecum's Indianapolis auction, a documented LS6 coupe sold for $253,000. Another factory-original LS6 went for $192,500 just a few weeks earlier in April. And at Mecum's Indianapolis 2024 auction, a white LS6 convertible, the rarest version, sold for $600,000, which is $660,000 including fees, setting a new nameplate record. The convertible record is telling. According to Hagerty, LS6 coupe values now sit around $98,600 in good condition, with the convertible benchmark at $234,000. A decade ago, those same cars were selling for a fraction of those numbers. The LS6 is the definition of a car whose time has come. The window to buy one reasonably is not closed, but it is closing. Car number 3, the Pontiac GTO Judge. And if you saw our last video on this channel, you know this one well. The Judge debuted in February 1969 as a $332 option package. Loud stripes, rear spoiler, ram air engine, and a name borrowed from a TV comedy show. Pontiac only built 6,725 Judge hardtops in 1969. Convertibles? Just 108 for the whole model year. Back in 2020, a solid Judge hardtop was trading somewhere between $50,000 and $65,000 at auction. Fair market, competitive but reachable. Here's where the story turns. According to Classic.com's market data, the average sale price for a GTO Judge today sits at $124,142. Not the high end, the average. And in January 2023, a 1970 Judge Ram Air 4 convertible sold for $1.1 million. $1.1 million for a car that cost $332 extra when new. The Judge's rise tracks directly with the Pontiac brand being discontinued in 2010. When a brand disappears, the cars freeze in time. No new versions dilute the legacy. No base model Judges pull the average down. The supply only shrinks. The numbers say it clearly. The Judge has more than doubled, and the rarest versions have gone far beyond that. But the next two cars on this list make the Judge look almost affordable. Wait until you hear what these went for. Car number 2, the 1969 Dodge Charger Daytona. When this car first appeared at dealerships in 1969, people weren't sure what to make of it. Dodge had grafted a 2-foot-long pointed nose cone onto the front and bolted a 3-foot-tall rear wing onto the back. It looked like something from a science fiction movie. Dealers complained. Some of them actually removed the wing before putting the cars on the lot because they thought nobody would buy a car that looked that strange. They were wrong about the market, just not in the way they expected. The Daytona was built for one reason: to beat Ford on the NASCAR superspeedways. Dodge needed aerodynamics that the regular Charger simply didn't have. The nose cone cut through the air. The rear wing kept the back end planted at over 200 miles per hour. At the 1969 Daytona 500, the winged Charger swept the podium. Bobby Isaac would later set a closed-course record of over 201 miles per hour in one. But here's the production detail that matters most. Dodge built exactly 503 Daytonas for the 1969 model year. Of those, Only 70 came with the 426 Hemi V8. And of those 70, just 22 had the 4-speed manual transmission. 22 cars. In the entire world. Now let's talk money. In 2015, comedian and car collector David Spade paid $990,000 for a Hemi Daytona, setting the record at the time for the highest price ever paid for one. He held that record until 2022, when Mecum's Indianapolis auction broke it with a $1.32 million sale. Then, in August 2024, a Hemi Daytona sold for $3.3 million. $3.3 million. Setting a new record by nearly $2 million. But here's the part of this story that most people miss. The non-Hemi Daytonas have been quietly running their own race. In November 2025, an unrestored 440-powered Daytona with just 3,693 original miles sold for $605,000. Benchmark condition. Every nut, bolt, and factory scratch still in place from the day it left the assembly line. The key word in that sale? Authenticity. The collector car market in 2025 is rewarding originality at a premium that restoration cannot replicate. That unrestored Daytona sold for $605,000 precisely because nothing about it had been changed. According to Classic.com, the average sale price for a Dodge Charger Daytona now sits at $529,820. That's the average, across all condition grades and engine options. The floor for a Daytona today is $220,000. The ceiling is $3.3 million. For a car that dealers couldn't give away in 1969, that's one of the most remarkable appreciation stories in the entire history of the American automobile. We're halfway through the list, and I want you to stay with me, because the next car spent decades being called the ugliest thing to ever come out of Detroit. Critics laughed at it. Buyers avoided it. Dealers couldn't move them. Today, the same car sells for more than most people will earn in 10 lifetimes. Car number 2, coming up right now. Car number 1, the 1970 Plymouth Hemi Cuda. This is the car that muscle car collectors talk about the way other people talk about the Mona Lisa. Not because it's the fastest, not because it's the most powerful, but because it sits at the intersection of beauty, rarity, and pure American performance in a way that no other car from the era quite matches. Here's the context. By 1970, Plymouth had finally introduced the third-generation Barracuda, a completely new design on an all-new platform. It was longer, lower, more aggressive. And for the first time, Plymouth offered it with a full menu of big-block V8 engines, including the 426 Hemi. Now, the Hemi engine option wasn't cheap. It cost $871 on top of a car that wasn't cheap to begin with. And insurance rates for Hemi-powered cars in 1970 were becoming nearly unaffordable for young buyers. So out of nearly 49,000 Barracudas Plymouth sold in 1970, only 666 customers checked the Hemi box. 666 Hemi Cudas. For the 1970 model year. In 1971, it got even scarcer. Of the 16,492 Barracudas sold, just 114 were Hemi cars. After that, Plymouth dropped the Hemi entirely. Total production across both years, 780 cars. Now here's the number that defines this car in the collector world. Of those 780 Hemi Cudas, only 21 were convertibles, 14 in 1970, 7 in 1971. 21 soft-top Hemi Cudas, ever, in the history of the world. Let's look at what this car has done since 2020. In March 2020, right at the start of the pandemic, a non-Hemi 1970 Cuda sold at public auction for $93,500. That's the baseline for the Cuda family in the early part of this decade. For the Hemi coupes, the picture looks very different. According to Classic.com data, the average price for a 1970 Hemi Cuda coupe is around $230,000. At Mecum's Kissimmee 2025 auction, a Tour Red Hemi Cuda with a rare factory gator grain vinyl top sold for $522,500, the second highest price ever paid for a 1970 Hemi coupe. A regular 1970 Hemi Cuda crossed the Barrett-Jackson block in January 2025 and sold for $605,000. And on January 17, 2026, just months ago, a 1971 Plymouth Hemi Cuda set a new all-time record, $3,300,000. $3.3 million for a production American muscle car. For the convertibles, some haven't even been formally tested. A 1970 Hemi Cuda convertible in lemon twist yellow sold for nearly $2 million in 2019. A restored example with a perfect provenance is realistically a $2 to $3 million car at today's auction prices. What's driving this? Three things work together here that don't exist for most muscle cars. First, absolute scarcity. You cannot fake the production numbers. 780 Hemi Cudas were ever built. That ceiling doesn't move. Second, documentation culture. Mopar cars came with factory broadcast sheets, VIN decoders, and fender tags that can be authenticated by a small community of recognized experts. A Hemi Cuda with a verified paper trail is a completely different commodity than one without. Third, the convertible premium. In the collector car world, convertibles almost always command more than hardtops. But when you're dealing with 14 examples total, the premium isn't 20 or 30%. It's multiples. These cars trade between serious collectors at prices that rarely make the public auction floor. The Hemi Cuda is not a car you buy hoping it goes up. It's a car you buy knowing it already has. So what does all of this mean for you in 2026? Here's my honest take. If your budget is in the $80,000 to $150,000 range, the 1969 Camaro Z28 is still the most accessible of these 5 cars with real upside. Well-documented examples are available, part support is strong, and the brand recognition with a new generation of buyers is undeniable. If you're in the $100,000 to $200,000 range, the 1970 Chevelle SS 454, even the LS5, not just the LS6, is a fundamentally sound buy. The LS6 is moving fast, but even the standard SS 454 is a car that most serious collectors still respect and want. The GTO Judge at $50,000 to $80,000 for a good hardtop? Still value there if you find the right car. The Daytona and the Hemi Cuda are for a different level of collector. If you're in that world, you already know what you're looking for, and you know this video isn't going to tell you anything you don't already know. But here's what I want to leave you with. Every one of these 5 cars had a window, a period where they were available, where the right buyer could get in at a price that felt like fair market value. For the Z28, that window started closing hard around 2021. For the Judge, it closed around 2022. For the Chevelle LS6, you might still be inside it, barely. The cars that most resemble today's undervalued versions of these 5, the ones sitting at $40,000 to $60,000 that collectors are still sleeping on. That's the subject of a whole separate video, and it's coming soon. That's the 5. Camaro Z28, Chevelle LS6, GTO Judge, Charger Daytona, Hemi Cuda. Now I want to hear from you. Which one of these 5 cars would you buy if money wasn't the issue? Not which one is the most valuable. Which one would you actually want in your garage? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. And if you want to know which muscle cars still sitting under $50,000 right now are most likely to make this same list in 5 years, subscribe and hit the bell. That video is coming next week, and it's the one I've been most excited to make. See you then.